Okay, welcome back to the tutorial on C++. Today we're going to be going over data types, variables, and commenting. First, we'll go over commenting. You can create a comment in C++ using the two slashes. So if I just write, this is a comment. You can create multi-line comment by pressing Control. Oh, wait, this is also a comment. We can write a multi-line comment by pressing Control KC at the same time while selecting what we want to comment, and we can also uncomment it using Control KU. If you forget them, they're also up here. Yes, so it's a little confusing how they put it, but it's just Control K and C at the same time. So you hold down Control and then press K and C, and then same thing here. Or you can just press these buttons. Or you can manually write in slash asterisk asterisk slash. And this one is multi-line, while this one's not. So what is commenting used for? It's super important in programming because when you create projects, you're gonna have a lot of lines. Even if it's like a really small project, like tic-tac-toe, you'll still have at least like 80 lines, and you'll have different blocks of code. And you wanna make sure you remember what each block of code does. So you can, like, a comment is literally just like what it's called. It's a comment. It's like a small note that you can write. Also, if you do get more into programming, you'll probably do a project with another person, and you especially want to comment so the other person isn't completely lost, because you don't want them to have to read through your code over and over again, because it's pretty confusing. And most of programming is actually about organizing your code, so it's not confusing, and like commenting is one tool. Okay, so on to variables. So for our programs to work, we have to manipulate data, and the definition of data in computing is information that can be moved, read, or saved by our computer. So, for example, our function is actually data, right? Everything on here is data. Data is actually stored usually on your computer in the RAM. If you look at the picture on screen, this is what the actual RAM looks like in your computer, most RAMs. And basically the best way to visualize where the data is stored and how like RAM kind of works is RAM is kind of like those vault deposit box wall things that are filled with just those like kind of like mailboxes, and you store your data inside those things. So each character we store inside of one of those boxes, right? And with C++, we can't directly access these mailboxes. So we have to use something called objects, and objects are just kind of like regions of storage that have values defined. So it's kind of like a row of mailboxes, for example. And a lot of this is kind of like technical babble, and since this is a beginner course, you don't really need to know this, but just if you get more into C++, this is important to know so you can optimize your programs. So an object can be unnamed or named. A named object is a variable, and you've probably heard variables before in math. We can just, in math, it's the same thing as in programming. You can just store data within the variable. So to start, to create a variable, we have to have the type specifier. So remember, like an int, a bool, we'll call it an int, and the name of our variable, we'll just say x, followed by a semicolon. Remember, a semicolon in C++ tells the compiler when the end of the line is or when the end of the idea is. So now when the compiler sees x, it'll immediately know x is an integer and x is also a variable. It has like data behind it. So then it'll try and look for data. So the data types are integer or int, integer or int, Boolean. That's not how you spell it. Boolean or bool. And these are the 5 most common ones that you'll use in C++. Float, double, and char. So we'll go over each of these. So you've seen int before, probably in math. Integer or int is just an integer. It's just a whole number that can't be, it can be positive or negative, but it just can't be a decimal. So here we have specifying integer as x. So x could be 5, 7, 192, negative 400, just anything that's a whole number. A bool will give us just true or false. So say t. And then we can just, bool is just true or false. There's only 2 like pieces of data that you could actually fit inside of a bool. A float is just a decimal. So we'll say float p. And a float is basically a variable where you can store a decimal. It goes up to 7 decimal digits, so like 7 spots. And what if you have more than 7? Well, then you would use double, which is just double a float basically. It's 15 spots. And then char, or char, which is just the same thing as character. And it holds 1 single character. So we'll go ahead and actually store data within these variables now. And so we can store data within these variables by using an operator, or just like a symbol basically, called the copy symbol, or the equation symbol is probably, you know it. Once the variable is defined up here, we can give it a value and store it. This is also called assignment or copy assignment. So we can go ahead and say x is equal to 5, right? And then we have t, which equals true. You won't really use booleans as much in C++ as other languages, is what I usually find. But it's still there. Okay, so then the next one is our float. We'll call this one is p. So p is equal to 5.0, for example. And then we can go ahead and do, shouldn't be there, sorry. And then, yeah, so these are these 3 variables that we defined. But what if we could define a variable and store a value all at the same time? It's actually what you'll usually be doing. So we can combine storing data and defining the variable in one step, which is also called initialization. So for example, we would just do int f is equal to 5. Pretty simple. You just include the data type and the value. Actually, most of the time, you want to give your variable a value right away. So you usually want to initialize, like, most of the time. So we can also define 2 variables right away, assuming they have the same type. So if we want a variable a and a variable b, we can define both of them in one line, just using that. And we can also give multiple values to multiple variables that have the same type in one line too. But a very common mistake that people will do is that they'll just put this, thinking that it will assign a and b both to 5. In reality, this only defines integer a, and then this assigns the value of 5 to integer b. What you'd actually want to do is integer a is equal to 5, b is equal to 5, separated by a comma. So we'll go over this data type, the char, or the character data type. Character data type, let's go ahead and create the variable. Let's call it m. We haven't used m yet. And the way what we store inside of a character is basically what you think. So you make sure you use single quotation marks, cannot use double, and you just store one single character, whatever like you want. It can be like a single letter, it could be a capital letter, it can be a number, it can be a symbol, but you cannot have more than one character, otherwise it will run an error. It should run an error. Go ahead and try it. Sometimes you have to update your debugger. Interesting. So here it only printed out the last character. Let's go ahead and run that one again. Let's see what it gives us. Yeah, so it will only give you the last character. Huh. Okay, so one thing I forgot to mention. Actually, so we'll go ahead and show you what each of the if we go ahead and print each variable, what it's actually gonna look like. So we'll go over like printing to the console later, but for now, this is just how we would write the syntax. So we just write cout this symbol, and then let's go ahead and pick our variables. So we can print out x. And we can go ahead and print out p. Yeah, I'll go ahead and move these up here, because this is actually what I forgot to mention, and this is probably more important. Okay, so if I go ahead and just print out these two, I'll set a breakpoint so it stops here. You'll see that it prints out 5 and 5. It doesn't actually print out our float because it doesn't need to. But if we like change this to 5.1 and went ahead and reran it, it will print out as a float, but it doesn't include the 0. Yeah. So what do you think would happen if we went ahead and printed out t? So you probably think that it's going to print out true, right? But in reality, it's actually only going to print out, I don't know if you saw that, 1. So why does this happen? Well, because in C++, you have to tell the console if you want to print out this Boolean, like an actual Boolean. C++, because remember, it's reading machine code, right? And machine code thinks a true is just a 1 and a 0 is just a false. So it's just going to print out a 1 if it's true or 0 if it's false, normally. If it's really important, you can print out, there's a keyword that you can use, and it's kind of like a toggle. It's called alpha bool alpha. And basically, once you print this, let's go ahead, copy that, I'll show you the difference. We can go ahead and comment this out too. Go ahead and show you the difference. It's actually going to print out the true, like this, instead of just a 1. And if we want to go back to the other way, we can go ahead and print out no bool alpha, like that. And this is how we kind of toggle it on, and then go ahead and print out t again, and then it should just print out true. Or it should just print out as 1. So it should be 1, true, and then 1. I set the breakpoint too far. Okay, let me try that again. Sorry. I did not notice the breakpoint. Yeah, so 1, true, 1. So that's a handy trick if you actually want to print out the true instead of just the integer representation. And then one more data type that I forgot to add is our string. So a string is basically just a bunch of characters. So we can call it string mo. And our string, we use double quotation marks instead of single, and we can actually put whatever we want here. So we can put numbers, we can put like entire words or phrases, and even symbols and numbers. And it will just print out everything inside of this string if we wanted it to, like that. Don't worry too much about getting it to actually print. If you want it to print, you can just copy my syntax. Yes. So it will print out exactly what we have in the double quotes. Okay, so here are the questions that we'll be doing. I'll go ahead and delete the answers. So, yep, go ahead and pause the screen and then we'll go over the solutions. So, question 1, what is commenting? Commenting is a way of writing kind of small notes within your programs. It is a organization tool. Organization tool. And it is very important that you explain your code with commenting. What is data? Data is information that can be moved, read, or saved by a computer. What are the three what are all the data types and what do they store? So an int stores an integer. A bool stores true or false. Only one of those. A float stores up to 7 decimal places. A double stores up to 15 decimal places. So I'm not going to write that out. But it just goes on for a while. So let's say 15 decimal places. And a char stores a single character using the single quotation marks, like that. Initialize 3 variables with 3 different types. Remember, initializing a variable just means defining it and giving it a value at the same time. So we'll start with integer, and then let's say O is equal to 10. Go to start. And then float, we'll call it, let's go ahead and just comment all this out with control CK. And then the neat thing about Visual Studio is you can also close commenting, at least multi-line commenting. So float, we'll call it F equals 10.1. Double is just, actually we'll go char. Char P is equal to the character exclamation mark. Yes, so now we have stored data within each of these variables or objects.